Hello, everyone. Hola, all right. My name is Ronnie Cho, and I am the Vice President and Head of MTV Public Affairs. What that means is I oversee all of MTV, MTV2, and mtvU's strategic direction and implementation of all pro-social campaigns across those brands, digital, television, and social properties. Basically, my job is to use all of MTV's superpowers for good. So over 4 decades, MTV has been a pioneer in using culture as a driver of change and impact. Whether it was airing some of the very first PSAs around the AIDS crisis in the 80s, when many media companies and political leaders stayed silent, MTV refused to do so and acknowledge the epidemic in ways that were very hard to do at the time. Many of you might be familiar with Choose or Lose, a groundbreaking campaign that inspired and educated a generation on the power of voting that led to record turnout in 1992. Boxers or briefs, some of you may be familiar with the question. It's Your Sex Life, let me go back once. It's Your Sex Life, a Peabody Award-winning campaign launched in 1997 that provided young people with information about pregnancy prevention, STD testing, healthy relationships that has been credited in many studies recently in driving record-low teen pregnancy rates. MTV discovered teens tended to be really interested in sex, so we thought maybe we'd give them some information about doing it the right way. Or at least safely, I don't know about the right way. That's subjective. Darfur is Dying. So in 2005, MTV launched a first-of-its-kind campaign, which is basically an online video game that was played by millions, which shed light on the crisis of the genocide in Sudan. At the time, New York Times columnist Nick Kristof, a leading advocate on the issue, wrote, quote, "MTV is raising the issue more openly and powerfully than our White House," end quote. And it's something that we're very, very proud of, to be leading the discussion on those issues prior to even President Bush's White House. So AIDS, voter participation, proper condom application, and genocide, not exactly the easiest issues to talk about, or certainly the most commercial viable topics at the time, but these are just a few examples of the campaigns MTV has launched, and each of them continuing the great legacy of the company and taking big, bold risks on the issues, getting results, making impact on the issues important to our audience. So that leads us to today. The decision to focus on the next MTV pro-social campaign started in 2012, so full disclosure, predates my time there. So the strength of all of MTV's pro-social campaigns largely is rooted in research, a mix of qualitative and quantitative analysis, and also an intimate understanding of what the audience is interested in, and a keen attention to and an instinct for what resonates with them. So when I'm asked what are the issues that they care about, one issue kept on coming back to our research department and also our Department of Public Affairs, and it was bias. Despite the fact that millennials are the most diverse generation in history and the largest generation in history, a generation where more women are expected to go to graduate from university and graduate school than men, a generation that grew up tolerant and actively supportive of LGBT rights. Our audience was still very interested and continued to wrestle with things like sexism, racism, anti-LGBT issues, and what to do about them. So thus, as Jen had mentioned, our anchor pro-social campaign was born, called Look Different. And take a look.
We will get justice for our children.
We will not be threatened. We will not be harassed. We will not be taunted.
No means no. Yes means yes.
Don't adjust your screen. For the first time in its 34-year history, MTV is deliberately taking the color out of its programming to mark Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
We cannot sweep the issue of race under the American rug.
Bin Laden.
Oh, really?
Because your English is so good.
You're so pretty for a dark girl.
People say and do racist things to me all the time. You know, like, don't you enjoy eating cat?
When it comes to racist humor, we're not just talking about being offended, we're talking about jokes being oppressive.
I want us all to take a moment of silence for Mike Brown and for peace.
White Squad is a team of carefully selected white representatives who act on behalf of people of color. We're your stand-ins for life's racially unbalanced situations.
So we're doing a film for MTV on what it means to be young and white.
I'm getting uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable.
Hey, this is great. Let's get all uncomfortable together.
Conversation is the key. You know, Martin Luther King Jr. always had the best quote to me, which is judge people by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. And you're not going to know what a person's character is unless you have a conversation.
One thing we still need to overcome as a society is not being totally weirded out by the fact that women can be in charge. They can be leaders.
Melissa slut-shaming is happening all the time now.
I can't believe that he thinks that I'm asking for it by what I wear.
Gender roles being taken to an extreme. We're photoshopped in opposite directions.
When did women start earning the same amount of money as men?
They haven't.
I'm Laverne Cox. We'll follow the courageous lives of young trans people.
It's getting harder and harder for me to pretend to be something that I'm not.
I was born intersex. The pills I take are hormone replacements. We need to be listening to people who are talking about this. Only then can we really make a stand to make a change.
It's up to us as people to solve this problem.
It's crucial to have this conversation.
Thanks. So launched in April of 2014, Look Different as an Emmy-winning multi-year campaign, an anti-bias campaign that urges young people to recognize and challenge the hidden racial, gender, and anti-LGBT bias that exists around all of us. And to support that data, as I mentioned, we rely a lot on research. So MTV had teamed up with renowned researcher and pollster David Blinder to develop a study to understand and measure how young people are experiencing and affected by and responding to issues associated with some bias. So here are a few things that we'd found. Over 70% of white millennials had never had a conversation in their household about race. 48% of white millennials believe that discrimination against whites have become as big a problem as discrimination against racial minority groups. And 70% of young people of color believe the country is still deeply divided over race, despite having a black president. With all the explosive events in recent years related to race, Look Different's campaign is certainly, if not unfortunately, timely. To date, Look Different has propelled young people to take more than 2 million actions using innovative programs such as this implicit association test that we developed in partnership with Harvard University that challenges some commonly held assumptions people have based solely on someone's skin color or gender. The second tool we use is called the Bias Cleanse, a 7-day program which creates daily tasks that we created with Ohio State University's Kirwan Institute that's proven to de-bias users based on a series of daily tasks that are proven to de-bias your points of view and your perceptions of people based on gender and color of their skin. Beyond a website, our campaigns live where our audience lives, on every glowing screen available. In the midst of the white noise of trending topics, viral videos, rapidly changing viewing habits, the ability to get in front of eyes, as many of you know, has never been more challenging, and thus requires creative approaches that grab the attention of a digitally distracted generation. So following a spate of deaths of unarmed African Americans, from Tamir Rice in Cleveland, Mike Brown here in New York City, or Mike Brown Ferguson, and the killing of Eric Gardner here in New York City, the news struck our audience pretty hard. They were consumed with anger, sadness, and confusion as like, why is this happening in the year 2015 and certainly into 2016? In response to the events, MTV did something that's never done before. And actually, I'm sorry, it's this one here. So in response to the events, MTV did something that's never done before, which is hard to do if you've been around for over 3 decades. We turned all of our programming on MLK Day in 2015 black and white. And the purpose was the monochromatic broadcast served as a visual prompt to provoke a conversation about race that was simply not happening among young people based on the data that we had gathered. We ordered short interviews with artists such as Kendrick Lamar, civil rights legend John Lewis, who you saw a clip of earlier, and Libertarian Senator Rand Paul, each reflecting on race from vastly different perspectives, but sharing common goals, to go from what Ariel Investment President Melody Hobson has described as being colorblind and moving to being color brave. The talk trended throughout the day, with audience members sharing their own stories and resulted in the highest traffic of the website lookdifferent.org since its launch 9 months prior. So the next extension of Look Different featured an MTV documentary directed by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Jose Antonio Vargas. You saw a little clip of that, and I'll show you a trailer of the film. Many of you may have seen it or haven't seen it. You can get it on demand today.
If you say the wrong thing, then suddenly you are a racist. I'm trying to be careful here.
I don't want to offend people. I feel like you guys are attacking me now. If I bring up any sort of race issue with my parents, they immediately assume that I'm demonizing them.
Can you have?
How might your life be different if you weren't white? When you say white, what does that mean to you?
We've never had to internalize what white people have done in America, but here, you can't escape that.
Feels like I'm being discriminated against.
You kind of get this feeling that things belong to you.
I'm getting uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable.
Hey, this is great. Let's get all uncomfortable together.
It's not part of it. And I should say, shameless plug, we were nominated for an Emmy for that documentary. So the next extension, thank you. So the next extension, as part of leading up to white people, I mean, white privilege is an issue that is misunderstood and certainly controversial. We wanted to, again, push the envelope a little bit in how we were promoting the special, and also to get folks kind of stoke the conversation before the special occurred. So we want to show you a quick clip that we wanted to prime the pump and raise the issue of white privilege in the form of a strange new startup that provided an unusual service to its customers.
Is your skin color holding you back? Are you tired of systemic prejudice ruining your day? I'd like to tell you about a new solution to racial inequality. White Squad, professional white advantage services. White Squad is a team of carefully selected white representatives who act on behalf of people of color. We're your stand-ins for life's racially unbalanced situations. Our team members are standing by to help you hail a cab, find a better apartment. Having legal troubles? White Squad will appear in court for you, giving you the full benefits of being a white person in the legal system. How do we do it? We've assembled a team of reassuring white people, each with unique areas of effectiveness. We pre-screen all of our employees to ensure their names and appearances provide maximum benefits to you. That's why our services come with a 100% advantage guarantee.
I had good grades, but I couldn't get a scholarship. Then I called White Squad, and I was decorating my dorm room in no time.
We'll work for you, and you, and you. White Squad, professional white advantage services.
So we aired the spot in prime time and actually throughout the day, and we were watching. We aired it with a straight face, without any wink or anything about whether or not this was true and a real company. For those who don't know, that's not a real company. But many people were fooled, and we had responses that ran the gamut from sort of WTF to, wow, this is really interesting, maybe I should give him a call. And it's amazing how much, what it takes to get people to think it's real. That's our working hotline. I think if you actually call it today, you'll still get like an IVR response. And there's a working website. And we kind of, created a little bit of a rabbit hole for folks to poke around. And many folks were convinced it was real, and we were accused of being racist to white people, and also on the other side, racist to people of color. We're like, they don't need this. We need structural help, not a solve to fight racism. So that is exactly the kind of thing we wanted to stoke among our audience, basically being unambiguously pointing our thumbing our eye into the system of systemic racism. That all the statistics that we listed there were, rock solid. We wanted to make sure that we were getting this issue right, and we ended up airing it on the biggest night of the year during the MTV Music Video Awards, and caused quite a stir, as you could possibly imagine. So in order to, let's see here, I lost my spot. So we wanted to pursue this issue of white privilege as part of a Look Different campaign with a mindset that, social commentary is one thing, but again, to really get in front of our audience, we needed to make this feel real. And so we took the tactics of what would a real startup actually do? And if you were really trying to get attention, you would have all these social media channels, right? You need a Twitter handle, you need a Facebook page, you need a website. All of it was working, all of it was interactive. We had people responding to, this is bullshit, why is this happening? It's like, no, we have hotline, we have people standing by to answer your phone calls, and people were really, really confused about what was happening. But we also knew the potential backlash there would be directed at a well-intentioned media company clumsily weighing in on race. We wanted to avoid these kinds of things, so we worked very closely with partners at the Anti-Defamation League and used data provided by the Bureau of Justice Statistics to provide numbers on the very real discrepancies in areas such as length of incarceration, private scholarships, arrest rates, mortgage approval between whites and people of color, in order to put hard numbers behind the truth and to some people, the myth of white privilege. And again, the reactions from White Squad ran the gamut from this is ridiculous to this is amazing, I'm calling them, oh my God, it's real, there's a hotline. So pretty interesting stuff. So that brings us to the phase we are in currently. So I'll list some final examples of what we've been working on since last fall when we moved from the race phase to the gender phase of Look Different. And as part of the launch, we developed another study to examine how young men and women are experiencing gender bias and responding to the issues associated with the issue. And a few key findings. Only 43% of young people regularly discuss gender bias with family and friends. So people aren't having conversations about it. Nearly a third of young males aged 14 to 24, and that's the general demographic that we've been polling, say that gains women have made come at the expense of men. And 70% of young women view equal pay as an important issue, with only 50% of men agreeing. So after collecting the data, MTV Public Affairs set out to dig deeper into three topics that we would address during this phase. One is rape culture, gender norms, and equal pay. In January, this past January, we released a campaign called Invisible Ads. It's a campaign that aimed to highlight sexual assault and rape culture as the most ignored form of violence against women through what is the most ignored form of media, banner ads. So as you can see, they all kind of look like things you've seen every day. There could be a .com diploma mill kind of ad you might see, and says, 1 in 5 women everywhere will experience sexual assault in college campuses. And there's a sort of a online daily fantasy game. What are the odds a student athlete accused of rape will finish the season? Highly likely. So it was one of those things where we put it on our MTV websites, and also featured on BuzzFeed, Spotify, and a number of other ad placement spots where you might very well ignore some of this stuff. And if you did not ignore it, if you looked up and said, wait, this looks weird, and you would click on it, there'd be a reveal that says on the far right there, ignoring rape culture the way we ignore banner ads doesn't make it go away. So again, provocative, surprising ways of getting in front of our audience. In March, this past March, MTV released a series of videos called Gender Bent that retell the absurd history of gender norms. We believe that gender norms, in many ways, act as a straitjacket for people to conform to things that they may not actually believe or feel is natural to them, but put people in a box that can be ultimately harmful. So take a look at one of the clips that we created around gender norms, narrated by actor and activist Cal Penn.
MTV presents Gender Bent, the questionable history of gender norms. Ah, the weeping man. It's a sight we don't often see. But why? Is it because men just aren't as sensitive as women? Not necessarily. The truth is, the tearful man was once considered manly and totally normal. Ancient heroes were constantly depicted weeping, and in the Romantic era, men embraced the pleasure of crying. So why did men turn off the spigot? War, the workplace, and tough guy culture could all be reasons men were shamed into suppressing this completely natural response. Imagine if it was laughing that men were taught to be ashamed of. Chuckles and guffaws would be done behind closed doors, and men would stay stoic when faced with this and this. It's quite ridiculous. Just like the notion that men don't cry.
And our next mini campaign within the gender phase just launched last month. On April 12th, which is Equal Pay Day, MTV launched the 79% work clock. We thought, because women in the United States make 79% of what men do every year, we thought, well, what if they only worked 79% of the day? Well, take a look.
In the US, women who work full-time are paid only 79% of what men make. So what if they only worked 79% of the day? That's why we created the 79% work clock. The 79% work clock reminds you and your coworkers of a simple fact. After a certain point in time, women aren't being paid. When a woman hears its chime, she might as well go home. To use the clock, move the 79% hand to the time that represents 79% of your typical workday. You can visit 79percentclock.com to use our 79% calculator to find the correct setting for your work schedule and race. When the time comes, a chime will sound as a reminder that women aren't being paid equally for their work. The 79% work clock, the daily reminder that the wage gap is real. Visit 79percentclock.com to learn more.
So we created and built these physical clocks, about 400 altogether, and we mailed them to elected officials, business leaders, activists, celebrities, etc. It was actually in the swag bag that every celebrity at the MTV Movie Awards received. And we didn't really know the response we would get. We, in many ways, just sort of blindly mailed these things to their publicists and their managers. But we were really excited. I couldn't put all of them on this one slide, but some highlights included Shonda Rhimes, Valerie Jarrett, Patricia Arquette, Gloria Steinem, for God's sakes, and Hope Solo from the U.S. National Soccer Team, not women's soccer team. I call them the national soccer team because they actually win. And right. So the response was astounding. That day, as I mentioned, was Equal Pay Day, which is April 12th. And that day signifies, for those who don't know, the time the following year women have to work in order to make how much men make the year prior. So about that far into the new year. So as you can see, MTV has had a long track record of standing up with its audience on the issues most important to them. Unlike many brands, this isn't some bolted-on CSR effort, but real part of the company's DNA, essential to its relevance, its distinctiveness, and its vitality. That legacy remains as vibrant as ever with Look Different, because for 35 years, young people have demanded that they want their MTV, but they also ask that their MTV give a damn about the world around them, and we're proud to carry on that tradition today. Thanks. And if we have a few minutes, I'm happy to take some questions if there are any. Yes. Mhm. Yeah, great question. So, we found not only anecdotally among the folks that were behind the creative around this, myself and other parts of the company and different departments, always respond to humor in a way that I think is not unique, but certainly more cutting to get into the point of issues. So if you think about Jon Stewart and John Oliver and those folks, and Samantha Bee, whoever's watching Full Frontal with Samantha Bee is astounding. Yeah. Because some of these issues are so effed up, and there's no levity to so much of the things that we're facing, the only way is to sort of force the issue and use satire and parody to illuminate how troubling these issues are, and in a way that straight up news doesn't really work. At one point, I think there was a poll that Jon Stewart was the most trusted news person in America, which I think is very telling in just how cynical and jaded the American public has become, given how polarizing the news and our politics have become. And that if there's one thing that's true, humor and satire sort of doesn't know any ideological bounds. And so that's one vehicle that we use to get the point across. And we've been, I think, fairly effective in doing so.
Again, thanks for sharing such interesting, thought-provoking work that you're doing. Can you talk a little bit about buy-in from the executive leadership team for support, resources, et cetera, and then also impact and how you track the result of such great work?
Yeah, great. So I have to say, it's not always easy to say to your boss, I want to talk about white privilege. I want to talk about rape culture. But, as I mentioned, MTV has always had a legacy in being kind of ahead of the curve on these issues and really being bold in its communication of what's really happening in the world. And so you don't come to MTV to be shy and to kind of skirt away from the issues that are really, really important. And so that culture is so pervasive and so strong, as Jen will probably remind you, that it's not just about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It's also about having a heart behind all of it. And that makes it easier to get that buy-in. And it also helped that at the time, the president of MTV, who was my boss, had my job. So he understood the reason MTV is so important and relevant is because we had a beating heart behind these issues and weren't just cynical jerks about the world and sort of laughing at what's happening and shrugging our shoulders, but really addressing them and giving our audience tools to undo and fight back. Which leads to the next part of your question. We track metrics. It's very hard to, right? Metrics around, are you less racist after you've watched this? Are you less sexist after you've seen this? Have you dialed White Squad? Has the services helped you at all? So it's very hard, right? So we have had to, get creative in how we measure those things. So whether it's are you following us on Twitter? Are you taking the implicit association test and the bias cleanse and a number of other, we consider proactive steps towards debiasing yourself, educating yourself, demonstrating that you're trying to educate people in your community by socializing our posts, sharing things on your social media feeds that have all laddered up in aggregate over 2 million actions. That we're very proud of. But again, it's a mix of art and science. It's really hard to kind of drill down on the impact, but it's also one of those things you sort of feel it when you see it. And the response that we got on both White People, White Squad, and some of the gender executions, we felt like we were hitting the right chords because the people who were responding to them were responding very positively and in a way that we were really pleased with. Yeah, that's a great question. It's something that we work hard to try to inspire across the different brands. MTV is unique because, again, not to bang on that point too much, but it is very much part of the DNA in a way that it just isn't for the other companies. It's not that they don't care about what's happening in the world, it's just never part of their inception. And so it's not quite as intuitive for them to have big, wide-scale pro-social campaigns. And that's the same for largely most companies. These sort of You come to a CSR place. You come to a pro-social place rather than it being part of the inception of the company. But there have been a few examples where we have, over the last year, in fact, gotten all of Viacom to come together. And one, which I'm very proud of, actually comes to life on June 2nd in partnership with an organization called Everytown, which is Mayor Bloomberg's anti-gun violence organization called Wear Orange. And so all of Viacom's properties will do a number of things, whether it's turning the bug, the MTV logo, or the Comedy Central, VH1, et cetera, on air orange to provoke folks to take a look at why we're turning orange and to go online and see what the deal is. And in partnership with a number of other media organizations, writing editorial, providing resources to how people can take action in preventing gun violence. That is one. Again, it's still kind of a controversial issue for many folks, the U.S. Senate in particular for some reason, that we should do more to prevent gun violence. It's a stance that MTV and Viacom agrees. Whether you're on the right or the left, we could do more to prevent gun deaths. I think it's something we can all agree on. And that's one of a few other initiatives that company-wide we've all agreed that we'd be in alignment with, in addition to, I think, one of the first major multinational corporations to instill anti-discrimination policies regarding same-sex partners and then extending benefits to domestic partners as well, prior to anything the U.S. government or the Supreme Court had done.
I just want to say that was a wonderful, wonderful presentation, very inspiring. I'm curious about what other avenues you guys use to spread this message, aside from just like the platform of the MTV networks. And I'm saying it from the standpoint of, a lot of people are unplugging from cable. It's a reality that, we're all facing.
Yep.
And of course, there's the internet, but have you done things along the lines of school tours? I mean, like, I envision stuff like, settings like this, a conference,
Sure.
anything, just to reach people.
Yeah. Yes, the cord cutting or the cord nevers is impacting our business in particular, really intensely. So as I mentioned, we're on every glowing screen there possibly could be, whether it's Snapchat, Instagram video, IRL in real life, settings like this, we're there. So on college campuses, all of the resources that we have is free. So the research we have is for everyone to look at. And we come across college students and professors across the country who are saying, we watched white people, we screen it every semester, we looked into your data and we talk about it every day. We've had conversations about white privilege, about sexism, about homophobia in our classrooms, that we avail all of our resources to everyone. So while we're still trying to get in front of as many eyeballs as humanly possible, that's a challenge I think many of us face. It's not a silver bullet, it's sort of more like silver buckshot in making sure that we're everywhere we possibly can be and being strategic and creative and initiating people. And at the end of the day, we believe that content is still king. If you create smart, savvy stuff, people will share it and find it. Especially in the fog of what's happening in the news and the media, that there's so much stuff out there. You still have to deliver, smart shit for or smart stuff for your people, and make sure that they find it compelling.
Hi, I love the presentation. I have a question
here.
Do you feel like making a stance with some of your campaigns makes you more accountable to the kind of content that MTV and Viacom kind of produces, or do you feel like the content is ever contradictory to the campaigns, or is it just kind of like two different streams?
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that question. It's something that I wrestle with, and to be honest, we need to be better and are getting better at that. If you watched MTV recently, it's not the most diverse place. It's not necessarily the most enlightened place when it comes to the content that we air. One in particular, and I might get in trouble with my bosses, but we have this series called Shannara, which is sort of a fantasy series on air that is a post-apocalyptic America. And so you're several hundred years in the future, and now they're like elves and dragons and gnomes and that kind of a thing. And so I sort of posed this question in a meeting once and said, wow, this is really interesting. We got elves and magic, but is it too much to to suspend reality and have a black person around? Or say that there's a dragon, great, and an evil dwarf, but what about a Latina? Is that too much to put in our minds in this fantasy world where there might actually be Asian people in post-apocalyptic Seattle, for God's sakes? So to your point, we are doing our best to make sure that we are talking the talk and walking the walk on all of this stuff. And I think some of the series that we've aired, from Awkward to Teen Wolf to Finding Carter, a number of the series have challenged these issues, whether it's on intersectionality of feminism, on intersex and trans characters who are actually trans people themselves, doing, I think, really provocative work in casting, because we have not done as good a job as we probably could have and should have, but that's a continuing battle that we're fighting, but I think it's one that we are getting better at every day. So I appreciate your comment there.
I applaud you as well for the work you've done. I want to know, have you ever been brand blackballed for taking such strong stands? And if you have, can you share the story of a brand or an organization that was like, okay, we go for MTV, you advertise and that kind of thing.
Yep.
And then the more kind of risky
Yep.
you got, it's like, goodbye,
Yep.
MTV.
Yep.
Because that is the ultimate.
Yeah, of course. Again, I'm very lucky to work at a company that is not afraid to piss people off that way, but in a smart way. As long as we're doing it in a smart and fair way, then I think we're willing to take those risks. I think the best example we have of it being a financial boon, perhaps, and an integrated marketing opportunity rather than a drawback is our It's Your Sex Life campaign. So we have partnered up with brands like Trojan, for instance, to air specials on air, PSAs, provide resources on campus through MTVU, which is our college network that's across several hundred college campuses across the country, to talk about safe sex, to talk about safe relationships, all of those things, where it brings in a fair amount of dollars. Again, in 1997, that wasn't exactly the easiest place to go. I think, not to get too personal here, but the first time I heard anyone say, you should wear a condom, we know you're going to have sex, you should wear one, was that MTV. And in hushed corners, and if you were lucky to have sex ed courses as a kid, you might have heard that. But otherwise, no one was saying those kinds of things. I think people rely on MTV to tell them the truth. And that continues to be a partnership with Trojan and other companies in the same space that have paid for many of our campaigns and that kind of thing. On the other side, I think we did piss a lot of people off around white people. One of our things, not to get too political here, but one of our litmus tests if we're resonating is if Bill O'Reilly airs a spot or has a conversation about how terrible you are and that we're shaming and MTV is the worst place in the whole world. We sort of know maybe we're onto something there. And if people are withdrawing their advertisement because we're just very sort of from a journalistic standpoint, a Pulitzer-winning journalist to say, this is a phenomenon, we're not making any judgments on it, we're just saying this exists and we can't undo it unless we acknowledge there's a problem, then I think we're okay with that. And we didn't lose any money. In fact, it was probably one of the biggest moments we've had at MTV in many years. So again, I can't speak for other companies, but I'm very proud to be a part of one that is willing to put its money where its mouth is on those big issues of the time.
Sort of a two-part question. One, how long do you see this Look Different campaign going? And then the next inception of it. So obviously race and gender issues are top of mind for you guys. My colleague and I are here for the Special Olympics. So people with intellectual disabilities, there's 200 million of them around the world. So that is something that we would obviously see as an important issue. And there's so many important issues in so many ways that people can look different.
Sure.
Sort of, what are the next one or two topics that you're going to cover?
Yeah, thank you for raising that. So we had made a decision early on that it's hard for us to enumerate every form of bias there is. I mean, anywhere from faith-based bias to ability and disability-based bias to regional, class, et cetera. There's so many places. It was really no reason other than a simplicity of giving each topic the attention it deserves and not being too watered down. And I guess that's my diplomatic way of saying we don't have any plans currently to address disability community and the bias that surrounds those issues. That's not to say that we wouldn't or can't. It certainly doesn't mean we shouldn't. But the next phase that we intend to kick off will be around anti-LGBT bias, which will be in early 2017. And it couldn't be more timely given the space that we're in that, I'll get on my soapbox just for 1 second here, and that, there's this rhetoric around America and this decline and how horrible things are and that the best days of America have behind us. But we're living in probably the most extraordinary time in human history, and things are happening in this country. And, if conceivably, if the elections were here today, you would have the first black president and the first woman president back to back in the greatest country in the world, that it occurs to me that things are a lot better than people would have you believe. And I think when it comes to addressing things like disabilities and things about class and faith and having a more open mind and not ignoring these issues is a place that we feel very strongly about. And so I would love to get your card after my remarks here to connect and find a way if there's an intersectionality between the things that we have planned along with some of the initiatives that you have, and certainly an issue that I care about personally and happy to support where we can. Great, thank you so much.